My name is Ashley Sullivan, and I'm 28 years old. Never in my life did I expect to stand outside my family home, staring at my belongings scattered across the front lawn like garbage. After 3 years of sacrificing my own dreams to keep their house from foreclosure, this was my reward. A note pinned to my suitcase read, "Reflect on your actions." The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. I had given them everything, and they had thrown me away. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. I need to tell you how it all began. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, I was always the responsible one. While other kids spent their allowance on candy and toys, I saved mine for college. My father, Harold, a factory supervisor, and my mother, Marie, a part-time receptionist, were hardworking people who never quite mastered financial planning. Still, we had enough, and they were immensely proud when I became the first in our family to graduate college. After earning my finance degree, I landed a job as a junior financial analyst at Meridian Consulting, a prestigious firm in the city. My starting salary was modest, but it was more than either of my parents had ever made. I rented a small apartment downtown and began building my career, watching my savings grow steadily. I had plans, a house of my own by 30, an investment portfolio, maybe even early retirement. The future looked bright. Then the economic downturn hit. The manufacturing plant where my father had worked for 23 years downsized, and at 54, he found himself unemployed with outdated skills in a competitive job market. My mother's receptionist position couldn't cover their mortgage payments, especially with 2 other children still partially dependent on them. My younger brother Jason, 25, had dropped out of community college after 3 semesters, claiming it wasn't for him. He bounced between retail jobs, never keeping one longer than a few months, because the managers didn't appreciate his potential. My sister Kayla, 22, was pursuing an art degree at an expensive private college, convinced she would be the next great American painter despite showing limited commercial promise. When my father called me that Sunday evening 3 years ago, his voice cracking as he explained they might lose the house, I didn't hesitate. "I'll help, I promised. Just until Dad finds another job." What began as a temporary arrangement to cover a portion of their mortgage payment gradually expanded. With my promotion to senior analyst came a substantial salary increase, allowing me to support my family while maintaining my own apartment. I felt proud being their safety net, their protector. "You're our guardian angel," Mom would say during our Sunday dinners, serving my favorite lasagna as a thank you. Dad would raise his glass in a toast. "To Ashley, the most successful Sullivan yet." Even my siblings showed appreciation in their way. Jason would wash my car occasionally, and Kayla painted a portrait of me that hung prominently in the living room. I felt important, valued, needed. "It's only temporary," I reminded myself each month as I transferred the mortgage payment. "They'll get back on their feet soon." 6 months in, Dad found part-time work at a hardware store, making roughly a third of his previous salary. "It's something," he'd say with forced optimism. "Every little bit helps." But the family's financial situation didn't improve significantly. Mom had developed arthritis that limited her working hours. Jason remained chronically underemployed. Kayla needed art supplies and participation fees for exhibitions that could be her big break. I began covering more than just the mortgage: utility bills, car insurance, groceries. My own financial goals receded further into the distance, but I told myself this sacrifice was worth it. Family comes first, right? At a cousin's wedding, my Aunt Barbara pulled me aside. "You're doing too much for them," she warned. "They need to stand on their own feet." I dismissed her concern with a laugh. They'd do the same for me. Yet sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I wondered if that was true. Would they make the same sacrifices I was making? The question made me uncomfortable, so I pushed it away. They were my family. Of course they would. As the 1-year mark of our arrangement approached, I expected some changes. Perhaps Dad would find better employment, Jason would settle into a career path, or Mom would discuss a plan for gradually taking back financial responsibility. Instead, during our anniversary dinner, Mom announced they were thinking of remodeling the kitchen. Nothing fancy, she assured me, just new countertops and appliances. The ones we have are so outdated. I blinked in surprise. That sounds expensive. Are you sure this is the right time? We've been living with this old kitchen for 15 years, Dad chimed in. We deserve a little upgrade, don't you think? And Ashley's doing so well at work, Mom added proudly. It's not like it would be a burden. I smiled tightly and changed the subject, but that night, driving back to my apartment, an unsettling feeling washed over me. Something had shifted in our dynamic, but I couldn't quite identify what it was. The kitchen remodel never happened. I managed to gently discourage it, but similar suggestions arose with increasing frequency. Dad needed a new fishing boat because his old one was unsafe. Mom deserved a cruise vacation after all she'd been through. Jason wanted to try entrepreneurship, but needed startup capital. Kayla required a studio space outside the house because the creative energy at home was stifling. I deflected most of these requests, but with each refusal, I sensed a subtle cooling in our interactions. Phone calls became shorter. Sunday dinners felt strained. Still, I told myself everything was fine. After all, I was keeping their home secure, their lights on, food on their table. That's what mattered. 2 years into our arrangement, I received another promotion, Senior Portfolio Manager. The salary increase was substantial, and I celebrated by taking the family to an upscale restaurant downtown. As champagne flowed, so did their enthusiasm and affection. I always knew you'd be successful, Dad beamed. Sullivan determination. We're so blessed to have you, Mom added, squeezing my hand across the table. That night, buoyed by their pride and the promise of my career trajectory, I silenced the small voice of doubt. Yes, this situation wasn't ideal, but we were making it work. Family supports family. This was temporary, just taking longer than expected. Eventually, things would balance out. I couldn't have imagined then how dramatically that balance would shift, or how soon I would find myself standing alone, locked out of the very home I had been faithfully paying for, surrounded by my possessions and that cruel note, reflect on your actions. 6 months before I found myself locked out of my family home, I began noticing alarming patterns in their spending habits. What had once been occasional splurges had evolved into routine extravagance, all quietly enabled by my financial support. Dad came home one weekend with a brand new fishing boat worth $15,000, replacing the unsafe one he'd complained about. When I asked how he could afford it, he casually mentioned a personal loan. The interest rate is reasonable, he assured me. And I deserve something nice after everything I've been through. Mom stopped buying clothes at department stores and developed a taste for designer labels. I discovered a $600 receipt from Nordstrom in the kitchen and gently questioned her about it. I've worn nothing but bargain clothes my entire life, she responded defensively. Now that we're finally stable, I should be allowed some nice things. The words "we're finally stable" hit me like a bucket of cold water. Their stability came entirely from my paycheck, yet they spoke of it as a collective achievement or a stroke of good fortune rather than my deliberate sacrifice. Jason quit another job, his third that year, because his manager had disrespected him by asking him to work a holiday weekend. He remained unemployed for 2 months, during which he purchased a new gaming console and several expensive games. Job hunting is stressful, he explained when I raised an eyebrow at the purchase. I need something to take my mind off the rejection. Kayla's art education expenses mounted steadily. Beyond tuition, which was covered primarily by student loans, there were constant requests for specialized materials, workshop fees, and gallery submission costs. When she asked for $2,000 to attend an art retreat in Santa Fe, claiming it would provide invaluable networking opportunities, I reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, my own financial goals gathered dust. The down payment fund for my own home remained stagnant. My investment portfolio grew at a fraction of the rate financial advisors recommended for someone my age. My emergency fund had been depleted and rebuilt countless times as family emergencies arose with suspicious regularity. Work pressures intensified as I took on additional projects and clients, hoping to increase my income to keep pace with my family's expanding expectations. I began working 60-hour weeks, coming home exhausted only to find another bill or request waiting in my email inbox. During a rare happy hour with my friend Stephanie Jensen, I confided some of my frustrations. "Ash, I'm going to be blunt because I love you," Stephanie said, setting down her wine glass firmly. "They're taking advantage of you." "That's not fair," I protested automatically. "They're going through a rough patch." "For 3 years." Stephanie raised an eyebrow. "That's not a patch, that's a lifestyle. And it's one you're funding while putting your own life on hold." "They're family," I said, as if that explained everything. "Family supports each other in hard times, sure. But this seems one-directional. What are they doing to improve their situation? Is your dad actively looking for better work? Is your brother developing any skills? Is your sister considering how she'll support herself with an art degree?" I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. "They're trying." "Are they?" Stephanie leaned forward. "Or have they found it's easier to rely on you?" "You're enabling them, Ash. And the longer you do, the harder it will be to change the pattern." I dismissed her concerns outwardly, but her words lingered. That night, reviewing my budget spreadsheet, I calculated that I had contributed over $87,000 to my family's expenses in the past 3 years. The number made me dizzy. The following Sunday dinner, Mom announced she was considering a kitchen renovation again, showing me elegant catalog pictures of marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. "We wouldn't expect you to cover all of it," she said, as if that were generous. "Just help with the financing." Something inside me snapped. "Mom, I don't think this is the right time for major renovations. I'm already covering the mortgage and most of your bills. Adding more expenses doesn't seem responsible." Her expression shifted from excitement to hurt. "I thought you'd be happy for us, wanting to improve our home." "It's not about happiness," I tried to explain. "It's about financial reality. Dad's still underemployed, Jason isn't contributing consistently, and Kayla's education is expensive. Adding debt for non-essentials isn't wise right now. So we're just supposed to live in an outdated house because you say so?" Mom's voice took on a wounded tone I'd heard increasingly often. "We can't have anything nice because you control the purse strings?" "That's not what I said," I replied, feeling a familiar knot of frustration and guilt. "I'm just suggesting we prioritize needs over wants until everyone's situation improves." "You make it sound like we're taking advantage," Dad interjected, his face flushing. "After everything we've done for you, raising you, putting you through college." "I'm grateful for everything," I assured him quickly. "But college was mostly scholarships and my own work-study money, remember? And I'm happy to help with essentials. I just think luxuries should wait." The evening deteriorated from there. I left feeling like the villain for suggesting fiscal responsibility, while simultaneously transferring money from my savings to cover their property tax bill that had slipped their minds. As I drove home, a growing resentment battled with guilt. Was I being selfish? Controlling? Or was Stephanie right? Was I enabling destructive patterns? That night, I created a spreadsheet documenting every dollar I'd contributed to my family over the past 3 years. The total was staggering. I could have owned a home outright in some parts of the country. I could have started my own business. I could have traveled extensively. Instead, I had an anemic savings account, mounting stress, and a family that seemed to view my financial support not as generous assistance, but as their rightful due. Still, I told myself they were family. They would do the same for me, wouldn't they? The question haunted me more frequently now, especially as I noticed how quickly their warmth cooled when I questioned or denied a request. Was their love conditional on my financial support? The thought was too painful to examine closely. I resolved to have a serious conversation about boundaries and expectations, but something always prevented it. Dad looking particularly tired, Mom mentioning her arthritis pain, Jason finally getting a job interview, Kayla receiving recognition for her artwork. The right time never seemed to arrive until circumstances forced my hand in a way I never could have anticipated. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, its subject line ominously bland. Important company announcement. Please read. Meridian Consulting, my employer of 6 years, was undergoing a major restructuring following the loss of several key clients. There would be departmental consolidations, role eliminations, and the phrase that sent ice through my veins: compensation adjustments. My boss, Marcus Wilson, called me into his office that afternoon. His expression was grim as I took a seat across from his desk. "Ashley, you know I value your work tremendously," he began, a preface that immediately signaled bad news. "You're one of our strongest analysts, and I fought hard for your position." "But?" I prompted, my throat dry. "But the executive team has mandated a 15% reduction in departmental budgets. I've managed to preserve all current positions, but that means salary adjustments across the board." He slid a document across the desk. "This would be your new compensation package, effective next month." The number at the bottom represented a 20% cut to my salary, nearly $24,000 annually. My hands went cold as I mentally calculated what this meant for my precarious financial balancing act. "Is there room for negotiation?" I asked, working to keep my voice steady. Marcus shook his head regretfully. "It was either this or eliminate 2 junior positions entirely. I thought this was more equitable. If market conditions improve, we'll revisit compensation next quarter." I nodded mechanically, signed the amendment to my employment contract, and somehow made it back to my desk without collapsing. The implications were devastating. I could barely maintain my current arrangements with my full salary. With this reduction, something would have to give. That evening, I spread my financial documents across my dining table: bank statements, budget spreadsheets, bill payment records. The numbers told a stark story. Between my rent, car payment, student loans, and family support, I was already stretching each dollar to its breaking point. A 20% reduction in income would snap that fragile balance completely. I ran scenario after scenario, looking for a viable solution. Move to a cheaper apartment? The break lease penalty would negate short-term savings. Refinance my car loan? The interest rate increase would cost more long-term. Reduce family support? The thought made my stomach clench, but increasingly seemed like the only realistic option. The following day, I scheduled an appointment with Elaine Cooper, a financial advisor recommended by a colleague. Her office was modest but professional, her manner direct but compassionate. "Looking at your financial situation," she said, after reviewing my documents, "you're actually in crisis territory. You're carrying the financial burden of 5 adults on one income, and now that income is being reduced significantly." "Their family," I said reflexively. "I understand family loyalty," Elaine replied, her tone gentle. "But there's a difference between helping family through temporary hardship and enabling long-term financial dependence. Based on what you've told me, this arrangement has continued for 3 years with minimal effort from your family members to improve their situation." "They've had setbacks," I defended weakly. "Everyone has setbacks," she countered. "The question is how they respond to those setbacks. Are they actively working to become self-sufficient, or have they settled into dependence on you?" The question hung painfully in the air. "Here's what concerns me most," Elaine continued, pointing to my spreadsheet. "You've depleted your emergency fund repeatedly. You've paused retirement contributions. You've delayed your own major life goals. And meanwhile, your family's spending suggests they don't fully appreciate the sacrifices you're making." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Ashley, if you continue on this path with reduced income, you'll be in credit card debt within 3 months. Within a year, you could face serious financial jeopardy yourself. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm." I left her office with a comprehensive financial recovery plan and a single, unavoidable recommendation: I needed to significantly reduce financial support to my family, immediately. That evening, I called my Aunt Diana, my mother's sister and the family truth-teller. Unlike my parents, Diana had built a stable financial life through careful planning and boundary setting. "I'm not surprised," she sighed when I explained my situation. "It's a pattern in our family, going back generations. Your grandparents did the same to your mother until I helped her establish boundaries. I was hoping the cycle wouldn't continue with you." "Why didn't you warn me?" I asked, hurt evident in my voice. "Would you have listened?" Diana's question was gentle but pointed. 3 years ago, when this began, you were determined to be the family savior. You needed to see the pattern yourself. But they're my family, I insisted, tears welling. I can't just abandon them. Setting healthy boundaries isn't abandonment, Diana corrected firmly. It's actually the most loving thing you can do. Right now, you're enabling behaviors that keep them dependent and prevent their growth. Real love sometimes means saying no. We talked for hours, Diana sharing family financial history I'd never known. How my grandmother had manipulated my mother financially, how my mother had repeated patterns with my father, how my siblings had been raised with unrealistic expectations about money. Break the cycle, Ashley, Diana urged before we hung up. It won't be easy, and they won't thank you initially. But if there's any hope for healthier family relationships, it starts with financial honesty. Over the next week, I prepared diligently for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. I created a detailed budget showing my income reduction and necessary expenses. I developed a reasonable proposal for reduced family support, not eliminated, but significantly decreased. I researched job opportunities for my father and brother, compiled resources for financial assistance programs, and gathered information on affordable housing options should they eventually need to downsize. I rehearsed my approach repeatedly, trying to anticipate their reactions and prepare compassionate but firm responses. I reminded myself that this wasn't about abandoning my family, but about establishing sustainable support that wouldn't destroy my own financial future. The night before our scheduled family meeting, I called Stephanie for moral support. They might get angry, I admitted, anxiety tightening my chest. They might say I don't love them. Anyone who equates love with unlimited financial support doesn't understand what love actually is, Stephanie replied. Stand your ground, Ash. This is long overdue. I ended the call feeling simultaneously terrified and resolved. Something had to change. I just hadn't anticipated how dramatically that change would come, or how quickly the family I had sacrificed everything for would reveal the conditional nature of their affection. Sunday dinner had always been sacred in our family, the one time each week when we all gathered around the oak dining table that had been in our family for 3 generations. That particular Sunday, as I placed a bottle of wine on the table, my hands trembled slightly. The folder containing my budget proposals and financial documentation sat beside my plate like a ticking bomb. Mom had prepared my favorite meal, pot roast with roasted potatoes and her special gravy, which only intensified my guilt. Was I really going to disrupt this family harmony? But Elaine's warning echoed in my mind. Financial ruin awaited if I continued on the current path. This looks amazing, Mom, I said as we all took our seats. Dad at the head of the table, Mom to his right, Jason and Kayla across from me. Only the best for our provider, Dad replied, raising his glass in the customary toast to me. The words, once warming, now felt uncomfortably transactional. We made it through appetizers with casual conversation, Jason's new job prospect, Kayla's upcoming art show, Dad's fishing trip plans. As Mom served the main course, I took a deep breath. It was time. I need to talk to you all about something important, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. There have been some changes at work that affect our financial situation. For pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of interest. The company is restructuring, and my salary has been reduced by 20%, I continued. It's not a reflection of my performance, just economic reality. But it means we need to make some adjustments to our financial arrangements. Mom set down the gravy boat, her expression concerned. What kind of adjustments? I opened my folder and removed the budget sheets I'd prepared. I've worked out a plan that allows me to continue helping with essentials while maintaining my own financial stability. I can contribute half of what I've been paying toward the mortgage, but I can't cover utilities and extras anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. Half. Dad finally said, his tone incredulous. You expect us to cover half the mortgage suddenly? Not suddenly, I clarified. I've outlined a 3-month transition plan. And I've researched some opportunities that could help. I slid job listings toward Dad and Jason. These companies are hiring in your fields with competitive salaries. Jason snorted, pushing the paper away without looking at it. More retail management positions? No thanks. They're entry-level corporate roles, I corrected. With your experience, you'd be qualified. They offer benefits and growth potential. So you've decided our careers for us now? Dad's voice had taken on an edge I rarely heard. First you cut our financial support, then you dictate what jobs we should take? I'm not dictating anything, I said, fighting to keep my tone calm. I'm offering options. The reality is, I can't continue supporting everyone at the current level. My salary won't allow it. So get another job, Kayla interjected. Or ask for a raise. There must be something you can do besides abandoning us. The word abandoning stung. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm adjusting support to a level I can sustain. And I've been covering all your expenses for 3 years. That's hardly abandonment. We never asked you to do that, Mom said quietly. I stared at her in disbelief. Dad called me crying about losing the house. You've thanked me repeatedly for keeping the family afloat. Every month, I transfer money for bills. How is that not asking? We thought you were happy to help family, Dad said, his expression darkening. Turns out you've been keeping score all along. This isn't about keeping score, I insisted, frustration building. It's about financial reality. Look at these numbers. I pointed to my budget sheet. With my reduced salary, continuing at the current support level would leave me with $320 per month for all my personal expenses, food, gas, everything. That's not sustainable. So your comfort is more important than our housing security? Mom's eyes welled with tears. After everything we've done for you? The guilt trip was familiar, but this time I recognized it for the manipulation it was. This isn't about importance or priority. It's about creating a sustainable arrangement where everyone contributes according to their ability. Easy for you to say from your fancy downtown apartment, Jason muttered. My fancy apartment is a one-bedroom I've outgrown years ago, but kept because upgrading would mean less money for family support, I countered, heat rising in my face. I've postponed buying a house, building retirement savings, even taking vacations, all to help this family. And now that I physically cannot continue at the same level, I'm being treated like I'm selfish. You're lecturing us about finances like we're children, Dad said, his voice rising. I was managing money before you were born. The irony of this statement, given our current situation, was breathtaking, but I bit back a retort. I'm not lecturing. I'm explaining my reality. I want to continue helping, just at a level I can afford. What about the kitchen renovation? Mom asked, her voice small. We already picked out the countertops. That she would focus on this luxury rather than our collective financial security crystallized everything for me. The kitchen renovation should be the least of our concerns right now. We're talking about basic housing security. I outlined my proposal. I would continue contributing to the mortgage at a reduced rate, help them create a household budget, assist Jason and Dad in finding better employment, and explore scholarship options for Kayla's remaining education. Additionally, I suggested they consider downsizing or taking in a renter for additional income. With each suggestion, their expressions grew colder. So basically, you're controlling our lives now because you hold the purse strings, Kayla summarized bitterly. That's not what I'm saying at all, I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. I'm trying to find solutions that work for everyone. Solutions that work for you, you mean, Dad corrected, pushing away from the table. After everything we've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us? By abandoning us when things get slightly difficult for you. Slightly difficult? I echoed in disbelief. I'm facing a 20% pay cut. And I've been carrying this family financially for 3 years. How is that slightly difficult? If you loved us, you'd find a way, Mom said softly, the words landing like a physical blow. Love isn't an unlimited ATM, I responded, my voice breaking. I do love you. That's why I'm trying to find a sustainable solution instead of continuing until I'm completely broke. The conversation deteriorated further. Dad called me selfish and ungrateful. Mom cried quietly, occasionally interjecting about how she must have failed as a mother for me to treat them this way. Jason made snide comments about my real priorities. Kayla eventually stormed upstairs, calling over her shoulder that I clearly never supported her artistic dreams. After an hour of circular arguments and escalating emotions, I stood up, gathering my untouched budget proposals. I think we all need some space to process this. Let's talk again tomorrow when everyone's calmer. I love you all, and I want to find a solution that works. But the current arrangement simply isn't sustainable with my reduced income. Running away from the problem? Dad challenged. No, preventing us from saying things we'll regret, I replied evenly. I'll come back tomorrow afternoon, and we can discuss this rationally. As I drove home, tears blurred my vision. I had anticipated resistance, even anger, but the level of emotional manipulation had caught me off guard. Their love, it seemed, was at least partially conditioned on my financial support. Still, I clung to hope that after a night's reflection, they would see the reasonableness of my position. We were family, after all. We would work through this together, find a compromise that preserved both relationships and financial stability. I couldn't have imagined that by the following afternoon, I would find myself homeless in all but the technical sense, staring at a pile of my childhood possessions on the front lawn and a note that would forever change my understanding of family loyalty. The following day dawned with tentative optimism. After a nearly sleepless night, I had revised my approach, softening some of the budget constraints and developing a more gradual transition plan. I picked up coffee and pastries from my parents' favorite bakery as a peace offering. As I turned onto my childhood street, something seemed off. From a distance, I could see a pile of something on our front lawn. Drawing closer, my heart began to race as recognition dawned. Clothes, books, framed photos, my possessions. I parked haphazardly at the curb and rushed to the pile, disbelief giving way to horrified understanding. All my childhood belongings, everything I had left at my parents' house, had been unceremoniously dumped on the lawn. My high school yearbooks, photo albums, the quilt my grandmother had made me, awards and trophies, even the spare clothes I kept there for overnight stays. In a daze, I approached the front door, the house key I'd had since high school clutched in my trembling hand. It didn't work. The lock had been changed. This can't be happening, I whispered, trying the key again, then again, as if repetition might change the outcome. I rang the doorbell, then knocked, calls gradually escalating to pounding as panic set in. Mom? Dad? Please open the door. We need to talk about this. The curtain in the living room window moved slightly. I caught a glimpse of my mother's face, pale and drawn, before she quickly closed the curtain again. Mom, please. I called, my voice breaking. At least talk to me. No response came from within the house. Neighbors began peeking out their windows at the commotion. Shame burned through me as I realized I was creating a scene. As I turned back to the pile of my belongings, I noticed a white envelope pinned to my old backpack. Inside was a handwritten note in my mother's neat script. Ashley, we've thought about yesterday's conversation and find your new conditions unacceptable. After everything we've done for you, your selfishness is deeply disappointing. When you're ready to reflect on your actions and fulfill your responsibilities to this family, we can talk. Until then, we think it's best we have some space. Mom and Dad. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Responsibilities to this family. Not love, not mutual support, responsibility. As if I owed them financial support as repayment for raising me. Ashley, is everything okay? I turned to find Thomas Foster, my childhood neighbor, watching with concern. We had grown up together, climbing the same trees, riding bikes on the same sidewalks. Now he stood witness to my humiliation. My family. I started, then stopped, unable to articulate the betrayal. They've locked me out. Thomas surveyed the scene, comprehension dawning. Let me help you get your things before it rains. My truck is in the driveway. I nodded gratefully, too shocked for pride. Together, we gathered my scattered possessions, loading them into his pickup truck. As we worked, I tried calling every family member repeatedly. All went straight to voicemail. They've blocked my number, I realized aloud, staring at my phone in disbelief. What happened? Thomas asked gently as we loaded the last of my belongings. I told them I needed to reduce financial support because of a pay cut, I explained, the words sounding insufficient to explain such a dramatic response. We argued, but I thought we'd talk more today. I never imagined. They've been dependent on you? He asked. I nodded. 3 years. Mortgage, utilities, extras. But my company is downsizing and I can't maintain the same level of support. I thought we could discuss alternatives. By alternatives, you mean them being financially responsible for themselves, Thomas clarified, his tone suggesting he understood the real issue. Partially, yes. Or at least sharing the burden more equitably. A fresh wave of tears threatened. I never thought they'd choose money over me. As Thomas drove me back to my apartment, rain began to fall, as if the universe were underlining the drama of the moment. I stared out the window, phone in hand, still expecting someone to call, to say it was all a terrible misunderstanding. Instead, I received a notification from Facebook. Curious, I opened the app to find my mother had posted a vague but pointed status update, heartbroken when those you've sacrificed everything for abandon you in your time of need. Family should mean more than money. The comments section overflowed with sympathetic responses from relatives and family friends, many directly tagging me with disappointed or angry messages. The narrative had already been established. I was the selfish daughter who had abandoned her needy family. They're painting me as the villain, I whispered, showing Thomas the post. People who use social media for family conflicts usually aren't interested in truth, he observed grimly. They want validation. By the time we reached my apartment and unloaded my belongings into my small living room, I had received calls or texts from 3 aunts, 2 uncles, and several cousins, all berating me for abandoning my parents after everything they've done for me. Not one had asked for my side of the story. Do you want me to stay? Thomas offered, concern evident in his expression. I shook my head. I need to process this alone. But thank you. For everything. After he left, I sat amidst the physical remnants of my childhood, remnants my parents had discarded as easily as they had discarded me. My phone continued buzzing with notifications, more relatives joining the chorus of condemnation, friends asking confused questions about the family drama unfolding on social media. I turned it off, curled into a ball on my couch, and finally let the full force of grief and betrayal wash over me. The family I had sacrificed everything for had thrown me away the moment I couldn't meet their financial demands. The love I had believed unconditional had come with a very specific price tag. In the days that followed, I would learn just how thoroughly they had excised me from their lives. My emails went unanswered. Mail I sent was returned unopened. Family members who initially contacted me to express disappointment now refused my calls, having heard only my parents' version of events. The betrayal was complete, clinical in its execution. I had been reduced from beloved daughter and sister to ATM, and when the withdrawals needed adjustment, I had been discarded entirely. The realization broke something fundamental in my understanding of family, love, and loyalty. The pain was physical, a constant ache beneath my ribs, a hollowness that seemed to echo with every breath. I had lost not just my family but my belief in what family meant. In that darkest moment, as I sat surrounded by the physical artifacts of a life and love I now questioned had ever been real, I couldn't imagine ever recovering from this wound. I couldn't envision a future where this pain didn't define me. Yet sometimes, when we reach our lowest point, we find ourselves uniquely positioned to rebuild on a stronger foundation. I just couldn't see it yet through the blinding haze of betrayal. The first week after what I came to call the lockout passed in a fog of grief and disbelief. I called in sick to work for 3 days, physically unable to function through the emotional trauma. My apartment, once a peaceful sanctuary, now felt crowded with the ghosts of my childhood scattered across the living room floor. Stephanie arrived the second evening with takeout and determination, refusing to leave until I had eaten something substantial. She helped me organize my recovered belongings, creating neat piles: keep, store, donate. You're in shock, she observed as I mechanically sorted through photo albums. This is a trauma response. Is it dramatic to call it trauma? I asked hollowly. People go through much worse. Betrayal by those you trust most is absolutely trauma, she insisted. And comparison doesn't diminish your pain. By the weekend, I had to return to work, my sick days exhausted. The effort of maintaining professional composure drained what little emotional energy I had. In meetings, I would suddenly find myself dissociating, colleagues' voices fading as I replayed the confrontation with my family, searching for what I could have said differently. My performance suffered noticeably. 2 weeks after the lockout, Marcus called me into his office again. "Ashley, I'm concerned," he began without preamble. "Your work has been uncharacteristically careless lately. The Davidson portfolio analysis had calculation errors I've never seen you make before." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I'll fix it immediately." "I'm not concerned about the fixes," Marcus said, his tone softening. "I'm concerned about you. This isn't like you." Something in his genuine concern cracked my carefully constructed professional veneer. To my mortification, tears welled up and spilled over. "I'm going through some personal issues," I managed, fumbling for a tissue. "Family problems. I'm sorry it's affecting my work." To my surprise, Marcus shared that he had experienced family estrangement himself years earlier. "Get professional help," he advised. "This isn't something you should navigate alone. I can adjust your projects temporarily, but I need you to take care of yourself." That afternoon, I called 3 therapists from my insurance provider's list. Dr. Allison Parker had an opening the following week, and something in her calm, matter-of-fact manner on the phone resonated with me. In our first session, I poured out the entire story: the years of financial support, the growing entitlement, the confrontation, and the devastating lockout. "What you're describing has elements of financial abuse," Dr. Parker noted after listening intently. "Your family created a dependency, then used emotional manipulation to maintain it." "Financial abuse? That seems extreme," I protested. "They didn't steal from me." "Abuse isn't just about theft," she explained. "It's about control, manipulation, and exploitation. They used guilt, obligation, and emotional blackmail to extract financial support beyond what was reasonable, then punished you severely when you attempted to establish boundaries." Over the following weeks, therapy sessions revealed patterns I had been blind to. Dr. Parker helped me see how my family had systematically manipulated my sense of obligation, how they had conditioned their approval on my financial support, how they had isolated me from family members who might have offered alternative perspectives. "The lockout, while traumatic, actually gives you an opportunity," Dr. Parker suggested in our 4th session. "It creates a clean break that allows you to rebuild your life and identity separate from their exploitation." The concept was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Who was I if not the family provider, the responsible one, the problem solver? Physical symptoms manifested as I processed the trauma. Insomnia left me exhausted. Anxiety attacks struck without warning. I lost 12 pounds in the first month, food turning to ash in my mouth. Stephanie convinced me to join her at a yoga class, which became a weekly ritual, gradually helping reconnect me with my body. Michael Campbell, a colleague I had barely interacted with previously, noticed me alone in the break room during lunch and began sharing his homemade cookies, then his friendship. Slowly, a support network formed around me, not the one I had been born into, but one I was choosing and building intentionally. 2 months after the lockout, on Dr. Parker's recommendation, I met with Grace Martinez, a family law attorney, to understand my legal obligations regarding the mortgage. "Since your name isn't on the mortgage or deed, you have no legal responsibility to continue payments," Grace explained, reviewing the documents I had brought. "Your voluntary contributions don't create a legal obligation." "But morally," I began. Grace held up her hand. "I can only advise on legal matters, but I will say this. In my experience, healthy family relationships don't involve financial coercion or emotional blackmail. Document everything that's happened, the payments you've made, the confrontation, the lockout. If they pursue any kind of legal action, which is unlikely given the circumstances, you'll need this documentation." With professional guidance from both Dr. Parker and Elaine Cooper, my financial advisor, I began rebuilding my financial security. I created a strict budget that prioritized rebuilding my emergency fund. I explored options for additional income, eventually securing a consulting project that helped offset my salary reduction. Most importantly, I established firm boundaries. When the first mortgage payment deadline passed after the lockout, my phone exploded with messages from extended family members, all conveying the same basic message. My parents were facing possible foreclosure, and it was my fault. I crafted a simple, factual response. I supported my family financially for 3 years. When I needed to adjust that support due to my own financial constraints, they chose to cut contact completely rather than work together on a solution. I'm sorry they're struggling, but I'm no longer in a position to help. The responses ranged from outrage to reluctant understanding, but I held firm to my boundary. Dr. Parker helped me develop scripts for these difficult conversations and strategies for managing the guilt that threatened to overwhelm me. Guilt is the mechanism they installed to control you, she explained. Every time you feel it, recognize it as the tool it is, not a reflection of reality. 3 months after the lockout, I received my first direct communication from my family, a terse email from my father. The mortgage is 2 months overdue. Bank is threatening foreclosure. Need your contribution immediately. We'll discuss your concerns after financial situation stabilized. No apology. No acknowledgement of their actions. Just another demand, with the promise of discussing my concerns only after I had resumed financial support. With trembling hands but resolute heart, I replied, I'm sorry you're facing foreclosure. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to provide financial support at this time. My offer to help create a sustainable budget and explore alternative income sources remains open. The response was a single line, your selfishness will cost us our home. I showed the exchange to Dr. Parker in our next session, tears streaming down my face. Am I being selfish? I asked, the doubt creeping back. Should I empty my rebuilt emergency fund to help them? Ashley, consider this, she said gently. In a truly loving relationship, would someone who cares about you want you to jeopardize your financial security? Would they refuse all help except money? Would they blame you rather than take responsibility for their situation? The questions clarified what I had been struggling to articulate. My family wasn't interested in solving their financial problems. They wanted me to solve them, regardless of the cost to me. That realization marked a turning point in my healing journey. The guilt didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. I began to envision a future defined by my own choices rather than family obligations. I started researching master's degree programs that could advance my career. I renewed my passion for photography, a hobby I had abandoned for lack of time and money while supporting my family. Most importantly, I began to understand that while I couldn't control my family's choices or perceptions, I could control my response to them. I could choose health over obligation, boundaries over exploitation, self-respect over approval-seeking. 6 months after the lockout, I had rebuilt my emergency fund, stabilized my work performance, and developed a small but genuine support network. The pain hadn't disappeared. I still felt the absence of my family acutely, especially during holidays and milestones, but it no longer consumed me. I was beginning to understand that what had felt like an ending might actually be a beginning, the start of a life built on authentic connections and mutual respect rather than obligation and financial dependency. The road ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time since that devastating Sunday confrontation, I felt capable of walking it on my own terms. 6 months after finding my belongings scattered across my parents' lawn, I signed the lease on a new apartment. It wasn't the house I had once dreamed of owning, but it was a step forward. A bright, airy one-bedroom with large windows and enough space for a proper home office. More importantly, it was a place untouched by the shadows of my past, a fresh canvas for the life I was now consciously creating. Moving day coincided with news of a performance bonus at work, recognition for a successful client strategy one had developed after my professional recovery. Marcus had pulled me aside to deliver the news personally. I'm proud of how you've handled yourself these past months, he said. Lesser analysts would have crumbled under the personal pressures you faced. As I arranged my belongings in my new space, I realized something profound. For the first time in years, Every dollar I earned was mine to allocate according to my own priorities and values. My financial decisions were no longer dominated by family obligations. The freedom was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. Working with Elaine, I developed a comprehensive financial recovery plan. We established automatic transfers to rebuild my retirement contributions. We created a realistic timeline for homeownership that accounted for my reduced salary but didn't sacrifice my quality of life in the present. We even budgeted for small luxuries, concert tickets, occasional dinners out with friends, a photography class I had long wanted to take. Financial health isn't just about saving, Elaine reminded me. It's about intentional spending that aligns with your values. My therapy sessions with Dr. Parker continued, though we reduced the frequency as my emotional stability increased. We worked through the complex grief of family estrangement, the anger, the guilt, the periodic waves of sadness that still sometimes caught me off guard. Think of grief as the price of love, she suggested during one particularly difficult session. You're grieving because your love for your family was genuine, regardless of how they responded to it. This perspective helped me honor my feelings without being consumed by them. I could acknowledge the pain of loss while still moving forward with my life. 7 months after the lockout, I received news through the family grapevine that my parents' house was officially in foreclosure proceedings. Despite the boundaries I had established, the information triggered a fresh wave of guilt and doubt. That evening, I called Dr. Parker for an emergency session. I could prevent this, I said, pacing my new living room. I have enough in my emergency fund now to bring their mortgage current. You could, Dr. Parker agreed calmly. But what would that teach them? And what would it cost you? Not just financially, but emotionally and psychologically. It would mean emptying my security net again, I acknowledged. And probably reestablishing the pattern of dependency. And based on their past behavior, what's likely to happen once you pay this time? The answer was obvious. They would expect continued support, and the cycle would begin again. Instead of sending money, I composed a carefully worded email offering non-financial assistance, help researching affordable housing options, connections to financial counseling services, job search assistance for my father and brother. I sent it knowing it would likely be rejected or ignored, but it allowed me to offer support that aligned with my boundaries. As expected, the email went unanswered. A week later, I received a LinkedIn message from Jason, the first direct communication from any immediate family member in months that wasn't a demand for money. His message was brief. He had been laid off again and was struggling to find work. Rather than sending money, I connected him with a recruiting contact at a corporate office supply company that I knew was hiring. To my surprise, Jason actually followed up, interviewed, and was offered an entry-level position with benefits and growth potential. Thanks for the lead, he messaged after accepting the offer. No apology for the past, no acknowledgement of the estrangement, but it was something, a tiny bridge across the chasm that had formed between us. For Kayla's upcoming graduation, I arranged for an educational trust that would help with her student loan payments if she maintained employment and attended financial literacy workshops. The structure ensured I could help without enabling dependency. Through a mutual friend, I learned she had reluctantly accepted the arrangement, though she had complained about the controlling conditions. My parents remained completely silent, even as they faced the loss of their home. Through extended family, I heard they had found a smaller rental property and were blaming their financial hardship entirely on my abandonment. Their narrative hurt, but I was learning to separate others' perceptions from my reality. As Dr. Parker often reminded me, you cannot control their story about you. You can only live your truth with integrity. 1 year after the lockout, I organized a small gathering at my apartment, a personal celebration of my journey toward health and independence. Stephanie was there, along with Michael from work, Thomas who had helped me that terrible day, and several new friends I had made through my photography class and volunteer work. As we shared food and conversation, I realized I had created something precious, a chosen family bound by mutual respect, healthy boundaries, and genuine care rather than obligation and financial entanglement. A toast, Stephanie announced, raising her glass. To Ashley, who taught me what real courage looks like, the courage to choose health over harmony, truth over comfort, and self-respect over approval. The words brought tears to my eyes, not from pain but from recognition. The journey had been excruciating, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more authentically myself. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice was tentative, lacking the confident authority it once held. "We should talk," she said simply. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. My parents arrived together, looking older and more subdued than I remembered. The conversation was awkward, halting, neither accusatory nor particularly warm. They didn't apologize for the lockout or the months of silence. Instead, they spoke of their struggles adjusting to their reduced circumstances, the challenges of the rental market, the difficulty of starting over in their 50s. I listened with compassion but maintained my boundaries. When they eventually broached the subject of financial assistance, I was prepared. "I care about you," I said carefully, "but our relationship can't be based on financial support anymore. I can help in other ways, job applications, budget planning, resource connections, but direct financial support isn't something I can provide." My father's expression hardened momentarily before he nodded in reluctant acceptance. My mother looked disappointed but not surprised. We parted with tentative plans to meet again the following month, a small, fragile beginning to what might eventually become a healthier relationship, though I harbored no illusions about immediate reconciliation or dramatic changes in their perspective. As I drove home, I reflected on the profound lessons of the past year. Real love doesn't use financial leverage as control. Healthy relationships involve reciprocity, not one-sided sacrifice. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for genuine connection. Self-care isn't optional, it's the foundation that allows us to truly care for others. Family can be chosen and created, not just inherited. Perhaps most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to my financial provision or usefulness to others. I was valuable simply for being myself, with all my strengths, flaws, boundaries, and dreams. These lessons came at an enormous cost, the temporary, perhaps permanent, fracturing of my family relationships, months of emotional pain, financial setbacks, and the shattering of deeply held beliefs about family loyalty. Yet without that devastating lockout, I might have continued in the unsustainable pattern indefinitely, sacrificing my future on the altar of familial obligation. Now I stand in my truth. Loving my family doesn't require enabling destructive patterns. Supporting others doesn't mean sacrificing my own well-being. And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do, for ourselves and others, is to say no when yes would perpetuate harm. Recently, I was approached by a younger colleague who mentioned in passing that she was helping her parents with their mortgage, temporarily. Recognizing the pattern that had entangled me, I invited her to lunch and gently shared some of my experience and the lessons I had learned. "How do you know when you're helping versus enabling?" she asked, her expression troubled. "Healthy help empowers the recipient toward independence," I explained. "Enabling creates dependency. Healthy help comes with transparent expectations and timeframes. Enabling is open-ended and expanding. And perhaps most importantly, healthy help doesn't compromise your own financial security or emotional well-being." As she considered these distinctions, I saw the recognition dawn in her eyes, the beginning of awareness that might help her avoid the painful path I had walked. If you're watching this and finding yourself in a similar situation, supporting family financially beyond your means, feeling trapped by obligation, sacrificing your future for others' present comfort, please consider whether you're truly helping or enabling. Ask yourself what would happen if you established boundaries. Consider whether love and financial support have become unhealthily entangled in your relationships. The journey toward healthy boundaries may be painful, especially with family, but it leads to authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. And ultimately, that's what we all deserve, connections that honor our worth beyond what we can provide materially. I'd love to hear your experiences with family financial dynamics in the comments below. Have you established boundaries that were initially painful but ultimately healing? Are you struggling with similar situations now? Your stories might help others recognize patterns in their own lives. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of personal growth through difficult circumstances, and share with anyone who might benefit from this perspective. Thank you for being part of my healing journey, and remember, true family, whether born or chosen, supports your growth, respects your boundaries, and loves you for who you are, not what you can provide.